Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Peter Stone, Director of Texas Robotics at the University of Texas, for a discussion on robotics and autonomy with Martin Rasser, Senior Advisor for Economy at SCSP.
I guess I should be on this side for...
No, it doesn't matter, wherever you're comfortable.
Because of this thing's on.
Sure. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. I'm very excited to be here with Dr. Peter Stone, who's a true trailblazer in the field of robotic autonomy. So I'd love to start the conversation to talk about your center at UT Austin, Texas Robotics. So, what are you and your team working on right now? How are you pushing the boundaries of innovation in this important field?
Yeah, thanks. So, I'm the founding director of Texas Robotics, which was started in a sort of a small way about 10 years ago, but really got off the ground with a partnership with Army Futures Command when Army Futures Command moved here to Austin. It's a interdisciplinary group that involves all the robotics faculty on campus at UT Austin, and they were distributed across multiple departments. So I'm in the Department of Computer Science, which is in the College of Natural Sciences. And then we have faculty, including Ufuk Topku, who I think he was here earlier, from Department of Aerospace Engineering, Mechanical Engineering, Electrical Engineering, all in the College of Engineering. And so it's all the faculty on campus who publish in the top robotics venues, ICRA and IROS and RSS. Those are the academic venues. And we've built it in a very sort of interdisciplinary, cross-cutting way. So the faculty are we haven't broken away from the departments. It's sort of, Texas Robotics is considered to be a part of all of those four departments, a part of both of those colleges. And we are now one of the largest academic robotics groups around. I believe we have now 19 core faculty who publish in these top venues. So we're trying to be both a full-service robotics group, by which I mean, any area of robotics that you might see presented at a conference, that there'd be one of our faculty members who would be conversant and an expert in that area. But then we've decided to go deeply in 3 or 4 areas that we consider to be the real, sort of cutting-edge, next-generation topics for robotics. One of those is long-term autonomy, so trying to have robots be on and autonomous, not for seconds or minutes, but for hours, days, and weeks. And so we have some of the world's experts on long-term autonomy, who, like Professor Joydeep Biswas, who was one of the first to have a robot autonomous for 1,000 kilometers. That was more than a decade ago during his PhD thesis. So long-term autonomy. Another is depth area, expertise area for us is robot manipulation. So we have, there's navigation, which is not at all a solved problem, but that's important for the long-term autonomy. Then robot manipulation, being able to move things around, is a cutting-edge area. And then we have deep expertise both in medical robotics and sort of a crossover area with that, which is human-robot interaction, which we take to very broadly to include things like rehabilitation robots in the medical area, but also interactive general-purpose service robots. So, it's sort of a very broad expertise, but then also depth in a few focus areas. And we've had a lot of support from the university. We've launched a undergraduate honors program in robotics, which is unique in that it's one of the only programs that you can apply to directly from high school. Most places you have to get into the university first and then decide if you're going to do robotics. We opened up 50 spots for this past fall, so the first students arrived just a month or so ago. And for those 50 spots, we got 3,000 applications. We admitted 100 and got 63 who accepted, which is sort of double the yield that you usually get in honors programs at UT. And it's just a phenomenal group of new students that have joined this. So I'm really excited about what's going on in Texas Robotics. And we have the partnership when we got launched with Army Futures Command, that provided the impetus for the university to renovate an old gymnasium for us. It's on campus called Anna Hiss Gymnasium. it used to be the women's gymnasium when there was such a thing as women's gymnasiums. That's no longer a thing. So it was just sort of falling into disrepair, and they sort of renovated it and made it a fantastic robotics playground. It's about 54,000 square feet, and it's when we were designing it with the architects, we told them to try to make it like, so that it would be one of the big tourist attractions in Austin. And so it is designed, so you could go to Anahis Gym now, it's just up the road. It's actually walkable from here, and just give yourself a self-guided tour through it. Everything's glassed in, you don't need anybody to let you in, because there are secure areas, but everything you can see through the glass. And then we have sort of video displays in the hallway, so it's a great venue to get a sense of what's going on here. So I hope many of you will get a chance to go see it.
That's fantastic. I'm actually going to be here in a few weeks with my daughter, so I'm going to take her
Please
to go
do.
see that. That sounds
Please do.
amazing. Wanted to dive into some of the specifics of your work, in particular with deep reinforcement learning. So you worked on this great agent called GT Sophie. I'm a big motorsport fan, so I'd love to hear more about the details of that. But then also the work, particularly on multi-agent systems, the RoboCup work. So what can you tell us about those efforts?
Yeah, so one thing they have in common, so I've been driven a lot in my research by this sort of series of landmarks in artificial intelligence that have happened over the years of computers outperforming the very best people at some task. So that's happened multiple times in history. There was when Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in 1998. It's happened, so that was in chess. It's happened in Go, in checkers, in poker, in Jeopardy. So there's lots of sort of events. But up until recently, it had never happened in a real-time control task, one where rather than having turns like you do in Go or chess, where there's time for the computer to think, where you had to take actions continuously in real time. And so we set out with my group at Sony AI. I'm the chief scientist of Sony AI in addition to my role at UT Austin, to try to beat the very best drivers at Gran Turismo, which is you can think of it as a video game or you can think of it as a racing simulation. It's actually a really, really high fidelity racing simulation, to the point that when I give talks on it, and you can see some on my webpage, there's an expert driver who gives a demonstration where he drives a real car on a real track, and then that same car on that same track in the simulator, and he finishes the lap within about 1/10 of a second in the simulation of the time that it takes him in the real world. And it models, so it models all the things like, friction of the tires, traction, slipstream, so that, if you're behind another car, there's less air resistance, and so you can do slipstream passes and things like that. And so there are people who have used this to train to become professional race car drivers. There's a movie called Gran Turismo that talks about that. And there are people who've put in their 10,000 hours to become real experts at this. There's international competitions. And so we created some AI agents using end-to-end deep reinforcement learning that literally started from random behavior in the simulator. So they were just driving off the track, driving backwards, but then gave them reward signal for doing well. And in about a day of training time on a bank of PlayStations, they were able to get faster than the best humans on an empty track. And then by the end of about a week of training, they could get to beat the best humans in a head-to-head competition. So we did 4 GT Sophie agents against 4 human drivers, and on a series of different tracks, and we were able to outrace them, to beat them in the competition. It took 2 tries. The first time the people beat the GT Sophie agents, but by the second time our agents were able to win. It was featured on the cover of Nature in 2022, and then since then it's become a deployed feature in the Gran Turismo video game. So if you have a PlayStation 5 and you have the game Gran Turismo, you can race against it. In fact, hundreds of thousands of people now have raced against GT Sophie, and to rave reviews. We've not only was it in a scientific publication, it's been really reviewed quite positively in the sort of video game trade magazines and the sort of fans. And as far as I know, it's certainly one of the, if not the largest commercial deployments of a reinforcement learning agent ever.
Yeah.
And so it's been really exciting. It's still being developed. There's a next version coming out in a couple of months. And so it's, I think, both been a commercial success and a scientific success.
So one of the breakthroughs there then, I imagine, is not just optimizing the agent to get the fastest lap time, but it actually learned tactical maneuvers,
Absolutely.
right? Like drafting, overtaking,
Yeah.
which is very difficult.
That's right. So this is one of the features in that Nature article. So it's, like all of the, I think many of the other success stories of AI agents beating people, there's a lot of computing power, a lot of data, a lot of really top-notch engineering, and then a few sort of algorithmic innovations. And the algorithmic innovations came around a particular type of reinforcement learning that we invented for this. It's a variation on soft actor critic called quantile regression, soft actor critic. And then also a way of getting the agent just the right mix of experiences, because if it just tried randomly against a bunch of people, it wouldn't see enough examples to learn these tactical maneuvers. So we had to put it in specific scenarios where it would start just behind a few other cars or just in front of a few other cars to learn defensive tactics, to learn slipstream behaviors, to learn how to pass on turns. And so, yeah, it learns, again, there's talks online from my webpage where I have a lot of videos showing these tactics that it's learned that I think are quite impressive and quite interesting. And we have examples also of testimonials from human expert drivers looking at it and saying, oh, that's a good idea, I should try that. Or, it was interesting, it did something differently from what I do, maybe I should learn from that. And so it's an example, just like that sort of famous move in AlphaGo where, there was this, where everyone thought it was a mistake and people have now changed their styles of play. We've seen examples of that with GT Sophie as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about your work with RoboCup, because that then, multi-agent systems, complex, dynamic environments, very unpredictable.
Yep.
So what are you learning from that research? How is that being applied more broadly in other areas?
Yeah, so I've actually been involved in RoboCup, which is the Robot Soccer World Cup, for a lot longer than GT Sophie. By the way, GT Sophie is also a multi-agent system because there's, it is competitive. But soccer has both cooperation and competitiveness. So for people who aren't familiar, it is sort of also in this series of, or aiming to be in these series of trying to beat the very best people at something. The grand challenge objective of RoboCup is by the year 2050 to have a team of humanoid robots that can beat the best World Cup soccer team on a real soccer field. And so that would, so far there hasn't been an example in a physical sport. GT Sophie is real time, but it's still in a simulator. There has been there was a drone racing kind of physical setting where the best human experts were outraced, but it wasn't really a head-to-head kind of setting. So in like a competitive team sport, it hasn't happened so far, and we're hoping that that we can get there with soccer by the year 2050. But there's a lot of richness there because it's it was launched right around the time when Deep Blue happened. So the first RoboCup competition was in 1997. The Deep Blue Kasparov match was 1998. And when you compare it to chess, it's got just so many more complexities that it is real time. It is in the real world. It's got both teammates. It's got a team of adversaries. It's got sort of imperfect sensing. You can't see the whole world at the same time. And so there's it's a rich international community that works on RoboCup. We have the most recent competition was in Brazil about 2 months ago. And there's different leagues, some with humanoid robots, some with wheeled robots that focus on different technical innovations. My team has won the competition several times over the years in various of the leagues using methods from machine learning, because that's a lot of the focus in my lab, but also some new multi-agent systems algorithms. Actually, it's spawned an idea for a current DARPA seedling that I have. The program manager of that is Matt Marge, where it's motivated by the idea of what people can do when they play pickup soccer. I call it ad hoc teamwork, but the idea is that if you've ever played a game of pickup soccer or pickup basketball, you know how to play the sport, but you've never interacted with the team that you're currently playing with. And so this happens, people are very good at this, but traditionally people have not worked on robot teams to be able to do this. Either you typically in RoboCup or in military scenarios or anywhere, if you have a team of robots, you program them to work together. You don't try to get them to sort of work with any random robot that comes along. But I think there are a lot of scenarios where that might happen. And so it's not just sports. People also do it, like if you're walking down the street and there's an accident on the side of the road, a group of complete strangers will come together and figure out how can they work as a team. Maybe one will rescue the victim, one will call 911, one will direct traffic. It's based on who's there and what skills they have and just what's needed at the moment. And I think this is a capability that we also need, sort of militarily. If there's a disaster rescue scenario, maybe an earthquake that we want to go rescue victims from, and we bring our robots, but some of our allies also bring robots from Australia or New Zealand or UK or whatever. We don't want to have to spend the first week sitting in a room reprogramming the robots to work as a team. We'd like them to do what people can do, just like figure out what should I do given the capabilities of the other robots that are there. And that may not be doing what you're best at. That's trying to figure out what you can do that the team has the most need for, capability-wise. And so we're doing sort of a sprint study. I introduced this concept as a challenge problem for the field about 15 years ago. There's been a small community that's been working on it, and then this year we're trying to sort of coalesce all of that into something that could become sort of useful in a more practical way. And so this was motivated by RoboCup, by the Robot Soccer initiative, but is going far beyond that as well.
So this is clearly a rapidly developing field. What are capabilities today that seemed almost unthinkable a decade ago, and how would you define the frontier today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting time. Of course, everybody knows that a lot of what's going on is with large language models and sort of the unlocking of common sense world knowledge that just wasn't there in a big way before. And so just, undoubtedly that's, when it comes to perception, trained vision models are being used in a way that was not possible, a few years ago. There have been big developments in humanoid robotics in the last year or so. So at RoboCup this year, there's always been a humanoid league, I think since 2005 or 2006, but a huge jump this year in terms of the capabilities of the humanoid robots. I've been showing a video of a particular robot called Booster that by a company called Booster that many of the teams used this year, and it's just we did a game of usually it's robots against robots, but we always have like one exhibition game where we take the robot champion team against people, aging amateur soccer players like myself. So. It's we always say it gets harder every year to beat the robots, but that's partly because we're getting older. But in this case, we usually do it against wheeled robots, and this was the first year where it actually wasn't crazy to have people playing against humanoid robots. It's still the people can still sort of run circles around the robots, and so we after a few minutes I changed teams and played with the robots, and so it was me and the robots against the other people. And there's a really beautiful video clip where I didn't know what was going to happen. I just sort of dribbled the ball and stopped it to try to give a chance to the robot, and it immediately just turned and kicked the ball straight into the goal through the legs of the goalkeeper in a way that just could never have happened. Certainly a year ago. I mean, in all the 30 years of RoboCup, there was no robot capable of doing that. Probably even like 7 months before, 6 or 7 months before, that wouldn't have happened. So I think, just the hardware capabilities of humanoid robots has advanced. Now, it's debatable whether humanoid robots are going to become practical from a service perspective. I think in many cases we're much better off with wheeled robots, and so. But for the robot soccer event, humanoid robots are perfect, and so it's a really nice match. So that's one thing that's I think advancing in the frontier is just the actuations, the mobility of legged robots of all kinds. 4-legged robots, 2-legged robots, and then. the ability to train large models is it's helping both at the common sense knowledge level, and then there are people who are trying to use it at the behavior level of and there's this is also an open debate as to whether the way to go is to build a foundation model for robots in the way that there's a foundation model for language, or if we should still be doing more classical robotics with model predictive control and PID control, but use vision language models as the sort of planning, common sense knowledge kind of layer. I'm more a proponent of that second. I don't think we should be throwing out the tried and true method of doing robotics. But even there, and we have I've a great collaboration with Army Research Lab on preference learning for robot navigation, where it's trying to take the modern perception, the ability to do perception, and sort of cluster and classify different terrains, and allow a person to very naturally give preferences for where they want the robot to move, and then have the robot be able to learn from that. And this is all using deep neural networks at the appropriate level, where they're still underneath model predictive control and PID controls for the navigation. And so I think there's a lot has been changing, and so there's a lot of people sort of exploring out in different directions and trying a bunch of different exciting things. So yeah.
So you often emphasize that intelligence is embodied, right? So robots learn by being out in the real world. So why is embodied intelligence so important, and what does that then mean for how we define intelligence in the age of AI?
I mean, there is no generally accepted definition of intelligence. It's one of those slippery concepts, and so I'm not going to put that to rest here. But I think embodiment is the only way you can figure out how the world really works. There's only so much you can learn from next word prediction in language. You can predict what people are likely to say next, but to actually figure out how to build a causal model of the world, to be able to predict what's going to happen, you have to be able to manipulate things. So I can see there's a water bottle here, but without being able to pick it up, feel it, be able to have a sense of what will happen if I push it. I have an idea of what I know what's going to happen if I push it. It's going to fall. I can imagine the sound that it'll make. I can imagine what would happen if I threw it across the room. All of you can as well. And you can't get that from just language. You can only get that from experience, from embodiment. And there are concepts like weight that only means something when you're feeling the force that it puts on you, right? I mean, you can say something is heavy or light, but that concept really doesn't have a meaning until you've picked something up and felt the different forces on your joints. And so I think embodiment is if you want to have certainly robots that move in the world, but even language models that truly understand the world, they need to be able to do the kind of sort of testing and experimentation that babies do when you put them in the crib, to try things out and form hypotheses and validate some of them, invalidate others. That can only come with embodiment.
Yeah. So do we need some form of foundation model for robotics, or is it always going to be a case where we need more specialized approaches in order to reach the next threshold?
Yeah, that's very much the open question these days. I mean, a lot of investment has gone into companies like Physical Intelligence that are betting really big on foundation model, end-to-end, pixel to torque kind of behavior foundation models. And Toyota has looked at this as well. I'm like I say, I'm sort of more in the camp that I think there are concepts from classical robotics that we are not obsolete, that we should be using. I think we can't ignore the concept of language models and their use for robots. But I tend to think it's going to be more at the level of common sense knowledge about the world, not about what to actually do with your joints. I think the common sense knowledge of what will happen when I squeeze this bottle or throw the bottle or drop the bottle. That is something that can be encoded and from and shared by lots of different robots trying things and having it put into a common model. But how this particular robot arm needs to move, what commands you need to send to the joints to be able to squeeze this bottle or pick that up is something that probably needs to be robot specific. And so I'm very much a fan of the idea that there's going to be so much that you can do, only so much you can do for a robot in the factory that's going to be general purpose before it sort of comes out of the box and gets into your house or onto your, into your office building or into your military camp or wherever it is, and then it's going to need to be learn from its own experience in the exact situation it's going to be. In the factory, it's not going to know enough to work the first time in my kitchen. It's going to need to be able to do some training that's robot specific, that's specific to my house. But that's where you want to have data efficient learning, and so a different style of learning in the factory from in the house, where you can now start using learning from demonstration. In fact, you want to be able to use learning styles that can take input from non-roboticists or non-experts, people who can just demonstrate what they want the robot to do or give verbal feedback or positive and negative feedback. And so, it would be great to have robots that can do both, that can sort of get to a certain level of competence with a common model, but then still have the ability to do sort of in situ learning and keep improving based on flexible human interactive interactions.
So as these types of robots start becoming more commonplace, in our everyday lives, trust and safety, I imagine, is a major consideration for broader acceptance. How are you and your team thinking about issues like that? And how are you addressing those specific
it's
topics?
very multidimensional. I mean, there's safety and trust are somewhat different. I think it's interesting to look at what's going on with autonomous cars, so Waymo is they're here in Austin and in other places, have really doubled down on safety and have a really they've been publishing safety statistics that I think are quite strong, but they're doing it with a very sort of redundant sensing system that's at great expense. But I think this is going a long way to build trust. Like if I'm starting to talk to people who are watching watching Waymos around Austin and saying, they're actually driving better than most people drive. And so I think there is an aspect of trust that just comes from experience, and that's in many ways the only way it's going to happen. We give driver's licenses to 16-year-olds after a 10-minute driving test, and then trust them to drive on the road. Based on, and it doesn't always work out, but it works out enough of the time that we trust that at that point they're going to be able to, based on their past experience, based on our experience with past people who've gotten driver's licenses, that they're going to be relatively safe on the road. And so I think, there are people who say we shouldn't deploy robots until they're provably safe. I actually think that's harmful. I think we don't require that people are provably safe. It's impossible. I think it'll be impossible to have robots that are 100% provably safe. And to have that standard is actually going to have a huge opportunity cost. It's going to stop us from deploying robots that could be very useful, even though they're not. There could be situations where they go wrong. And so I think safety is in many ways has to be an empirical concept, trust has to be an empirical concept, that people follow them. Now, safety is different. There are things that do come up with large-scale deployments that don't come up with people, right? There's no way to hack into people and cause all people to do the same thing wrong at the same time. You could imagine somebody disabling all of our traffic signals or turning them all green at the same time, and that would cause accidents. But the concept of safety is much different when you have a lot of autonomous robots out there, all controlled by the same software, such that if somebody got into that one sort of software base, it could cause all of them to do something wrong at the same time. That's more of a safety security kind of thing, and that's outside of my realm of expertise. That's where we rely on computer security experts. But that's a really important part of the puzzle when you're trying to deploy autonomous robots in a large scale kind of way, especially if it's uniform software on a lot of different devices.
As a closing thought, what's the one thing you want everyone here to walk away with?
Oh, that's I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I think robots are very different than software agents. It's very easy to anthropomorphize robots and to sort of jump to the idea that they're going to, because we have large language models that can do very impressive tasks, that robotics is just around the corner and it's going to, they're going to be as good as people at everything. And I think we're much farther away from that than people tend to think. Getting things to work in the real world remains very challenging, and so I would say, again, I'm a strong believer that we should not be throwing out the baby with the bathwater in terms of all of the fantastic progress that we've made in classical robotics, in model predictive control, and PID control, and control theory, and I think we should not be throwing that away and trying to just replace it all with a data-based end-to-end learning approach, like we can do if you have a good simulator, like we did do in GT Sophie. In robotics, I think we're going to need to look at much more carefully engineered hybrid approaches.
Right, Dr. Peter Stone, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For the final session of the day, please join